Today we're talking about Armadillidium albino. And you can see the tub that we have them in. This is a 6-quart. We're going to be rehoming them into a bigger container because they just need to be. So stick around and we'll get a close-up view of these beautiful, beautiful animals. And you'll watch as I rehome them.
The Isopod vlog.
You can see the tub that we keep these in. It's, again, a 6-quart. I'll be moving them into a 27-quart. Probably put some ventilation holes in the top so they have a little bit better ventilation. How do you like our table? Let me tell you a quick story about this table. We moved into this house about 20 years ago. We were looking for some furniture for the dining room and went to Steinhoff's, a local furniture store here in town. The dining room set would be delivered in about 5 days. Came home that evening and saw a garage sale not 2 doors down from our house. Stopped by, they had this old table. And the couple was moving to Africa on a mission trip. They were selling this table. We picked it up for, if I remember right, about $100. Huge table. It's old, like I said. I think the date that this was built was in the 1910s. And it's just such a great family heirloom. But enough about the table. Let's talk about isopods. As we saw, these Armadillidium albinos are just a gorgeous animal. They're outgrowing this tub. I keep these animals in a tub like this for a few months before moving them to bigger tubs just to make sure that I can manage them, keep a closer eye on them. And with these guys, it's about time. I see a lot of mankai down on the bottom, so let's go ahead and set up a new tub. I'll show you what we need to do that in just a second. Let me show you those supplies that we're going to be using for this process. But first, let me thank Polydema from Vivariums in the Mist. How about that t-shirt? Isn't that beautiful? Love the t-shirt. So let's check the supplies. I'm out of coffee. First the coffee, then the supplies. Be right back. That helps. I mentioned one of our supporters, Polydema from Vivariums in the Mist, right? Okay, let's jump into the supplies. Again, we're moving from the 6-quart starter culture setup to this 28-quart enclosure. You can see the ventilation holes. We've got 3 of them on one side. You can guess which side the sphagnum moss is going on. I'll probably add another bigger hole on this side as well for ventilation. The substrate always starts with Zilla's Jungle Mix. This is just such a great base for this substrate. I absolutely love it. We'll be adding some charcoal. And again, this is brick charcoal that you would pick up at a home improvement store. Those are big blocks like this. I put it in like a snake bag. I take it out to the driveway and I run over it with the car a few times to come up with the smaller chunks. And obviously we'll be adding the smaller chunks to this mix rather than the big bricks. We'll be throwing in a little bit of this orchid potting mix. All that it is simply, if I can get this out without spilling it all over, it's chunks of wood. I think it just gives more air to the substrate and it allows the isopods some areas where they can go under the surface and collect. Wood pulp. You can get this at home improvement stores in big bags of pellets that's used in starting grills and keeping grills going. Look for the hardwood versions. Make sure that it's not treated. Again, it comes in pellets. You can put it in a big tub, put water in it, and it just disintegrates into this real fine powder. The short-term benefit of using these disintegrated wood pellets is that it adds consistency to the substrate. The long-term benefit is after a few months, this wood starts decomposing and it provides food for these isopods. Hey, for everybody watching, can you not tell Nanette I'm using her good bowls from the kitchen? I'll thoroughly wash these when I'm done. And again, this is just a wood pellet, but don't tell Nanette. Next, we have good old-fashioned dirt. This is compost dirt, and I'll get a picture of the bags that we use and the brand that we use in just a second. But this is really great dirt. It just crumbles up in your hand here. Fantastic dirt. And again, we'll be adding the other materials to this dirt. Just breaking up some of the bigger pieces here. You can see I didn't grab one of Nanette's good dishes for this one. Don't want to put dirt in dishes. As with just about every single isopod enclosure that we make, we add sphagnum moss. And I love this premium sphagnum moss that we get. It's so clean. It's just a perfect sphagnum moss. So we'll be putting in a clump of the sphagnum moss into the enclosure as well to keep that area moist for these isopods. Not specifically a part of the substrate, but we'll be adding some calcium for human consumption to the mix just to give them that calcium base. And we'll also be adding some potato salad. Well, not potato salad. This is actually, if I could get the lid off, this is actually ground eggshells. So we'll be adding some of the calcium and we'll be adding the eggshells to the substrate. What else will we be adding to this enclosure? Well, if you don't know by now, you really should. Dried decaying leaves. Decaying leaves, my favorite. So this is just one bag of about 25, I think, that we raked up this fall for this winter, because for us in Wisconsin, the winter looks something like this. That's right, we've got about 3 inches of snow on the ground, and we probably are getting about 10 inches tonight. Not many leaves can be found under that many inches of snow. Two more things before we set up this enclosure. We've got the leaf back here. I'll move that out of our way. Can you see it? That's right. We have decaying wood that we'll be adding. And I love these pieces because they have a little bit of a concave look to them that the isopods can get under. And finally, we'll be adding a lot of water just to keep that substrate moist. So let's get into it. Let's start setting up this enclosure, and I'll talk about the ingredients as we go through the setup. Okay, the first two ingredients will be the dirt. I really don't like to measure this out specifically. I just like to dump it in, make sure it's all broken down. So now I have a real nice base. Next, we're adding our Zilla Jungle Mix. This is about a 1-to-1 ratio. Some of the enclosures I like to set up with a little bit more of the dirt than jungle mix. Spread that out. That looks about right. Mix it in a little bit. Let's throw in our wood pellets, and I'm not going to use a ton of this, but just a really good additive. Mix that in a little bit. So right now, that's the basis for this substrate. And it's about, what is that, about an inch, inch and a quarter deep. What's next? Dried leaves. At this point you might be asking, well, don't you put leaves on top of the substrate? I do, but I also like to put leaves right in the substrate because that again gives them additional food. Not right away, but eventually those leaves will break down and become another food source for these isopods. These long stems really bug me. I don't know why, but I like to tear them off of these bigger leaves. They really don't disintegrate that well, and they actually become a nuisance in the enclosure from my perspective. So again, taking off the stems off these leaves, I'm sure there's a term to describe this. I'm sure these stems don't hurt anything, but I just don't like them in there. Anybody know the term for this behavior? This is actually my favorite part of setting this up. I just know how much these leaves are going to matter to the isopods. If you're not keeping a lot of leaves in your isopod enclosure, take another look at them, because a lot of isopods need these dried, decaying leaves for nutritional purposes. Okay, now that we have a good group of leaves broken up here, let's go ahead and mix them into the substrate. And there is no science to this. I'm just grabbing handfuls and trying to bury them a little bit into the substrate. Even the substrate out a little bit, and again, we'll be adding more leaves in just a moment. I think this looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and throw in some charcoal at this point. I don't like to add a lot of charcoal, but I just, again, I want to get a good mix of charcoal in here, so that these isopods have somewhere to go underneath the soil. I think we're set. I think our substrate looks pretty good here. I'm going to go ahead and add some calcium. Now you can add the calcium right to the soil. I don't really like to do that. I like to monitor the calcium that we're adding. So I'm just going to grab a small handful. I don't know if you can see that, but I don't know, what is that, a tablespoon? You can see that I'm very, very accurate with my measurements. This is the powdered calcium made for human consumption, so I'm going to throw about a half a teaspoon over on this side. Okay, what's next? Next is the sphagnum moss. I'm going to be very, very liberal with this. I'm going to pull out a clump. Oops, wrong side. Why is it the wrong side? Because I have my ventilation holes over here. I want the sphagnum moss going in and staying hydrated. I don't want it drying out. So I keep it away from the ventilation holes. Again, if I'm going to do the top with ventilation holes, which I probably will within the next couple of weeks, I'll go ahead and add probably one big ventilation hole right here. I love this brand. It's so clean. At this point, it's time to hydrate this whole substrate. So let me crank up this misting bottle here. And again, there is no science to this. You just want to get it to the point where it feels wet. I'll go ahead and mix that substrate a little bit after I'm done. I have a feeling I'll be going back for some more water in just a second. I really, really want that substrate to be damp. I don't want it wet at all. We're running out of water here. Let's do it the quick way. I really want this area right here to be moist. Okay, what's next? I'm going to throw in some more leaves. Why more leaves? Just because with the leaves on the surface, that's what I can monitor to make sure that they're eating. Yes, I've got to go through this routine again. Here's a reason why you want to pull these stems off of these leaves. Maybe a good reason, because if you do close the tub and you have a stem sitting out like this, maybe a bigger stem, those isopods could climb using this stem and get out if you don't have a really, really super tight seal in these enclosures. Okay, sphagnum moss, leaves, looking around for anything else that we need to add. Oh yes, we need to add the isopods. So I'm going to come over here, grab my culture of isopods, and I'm going to gently put them down. You can just see all of the springtails in here as well. Ultimately, what I will be doing is taking all of the mix out of this container and putting it into the other container. Boy, there's a lot of isopods in here. So let me grab a bigger spoon and let's start doing that. Okay, I'm back. And no, this is not Nanette's measuring cup. This is mine. I mix fruit fly cultures with this. So I'm going to gently try to dig up as much of this culture as I can and lightly spread it out on top of our new enclosure. This part I just absolutely hate because I know I'm getting in there with these isopods and they do not like this at all. The hard part is that I know if these isopods are molting, this isn't doing them any good whatsoever. Let's do one more cup here. There's a lot of isopods buried in this substrate. Let's go ahead and just gently pour these in. I know it looks like a mess, but in a couple of weeks this will all be kind of straightened out. Just double check to make sure that I got all the isopods. I think we're good. Let's take a closer look at this whole mix here. But before we do that, I almost forgot. Somebody should have reminded me. Let's put our wood in. I'm going to kind of push this down a little bit so I can get my top down. But as you can see, I'm putting this wood expanding from the moist area all the way back into the dry area. That way it gives them kind of a bridge between the dry area and the moist area. Let's take a look at this up close. And here we go. You can see the moist area on the right, the dry area on the left. You got the two pieces of wood, a little small piece of cork bark over there. We've got the calcium still sitting there. We've got a pile of calcium that you probably can't see over on this side. And we've got a couple of isopods making their way around. Beautiful animals. I love these Armadillidium albinos. When they're young, they have that true albino look to them. When they get bigger, you can see that they turn a little bit darker, but still a very, very attractive isopod. I hope you enjoyed this video. We had a lot of fun making it. I think this will really benefit those isopods and give them a new big home. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button down below, hit the notification, hit the all so you don't miss another video. We'll catch you next week for another issue of the Isopod vlog, and thank you again very much for watching.